of us to start with, each perched in a remote watchtower, our only contact with the outside world through a ham radio and the guy who delivered beer and food every 2 weeks. To make sure none of us rolled an ankle or got mauled by a mountain lion while on patrol, we did 2 checks a day, one at 6 a.m., one at 6 p.m. Things headed south right after Luke, the ranger in Tower 4, didn't report in for a morning check. Tower 4, come in, the station operator repeated. Do you read me? Over. No response. The checks were a big deal, huge even. If any of us missed too many in a row, the station would deploy a team to make sure nobody had died, and there'd be hell to pay for stirring a panic over nothing. Phil from Tower 1 said, Operator, the storm might be messing with Luke's signal. I can see it rolling in from the west. Over. He wasn't kidding. When I woke up that morning, the far horizoned mountains were gone, swallowed by black thunder clouds and thick mist. Hitch from Tower 2 added that, or he had himself another celebration last evening. Over. I snorted. I'd always liked Hitch. She had this nasally southern twang I dug. We'd camped together earlier that year when a 10-year-old girl got lost in the woods. It took 3 days to find the poor kid. She turned up caked with dirt and delirious from drinking mud water. Hitch wasn't wrong, by the way. Luke had a nasty habit of missing checks on account of a hangover. Already he was on thin ice. I pushed the transceiver and said, Oh yeah, rest of us at a party in Tower 4 last night, Hitch. Didn't you get the invite? Over. Sure I did. She pronounced sure as sir. Just didn't much want to share a cramped cabin with 3 horny losers who haven't showered in 8 months. Over. I could hear the irritation in the operator's voice when he said, All right, that's enough. Keep the channel open. We'll see if the signal clears up by this evening. Over and out. With the checks done, my time was my own, and that was just how I liked it. After some coffee and breakfast, I threw a rifle over my shoulder and exited the cabin. My tower, Tower 3, stood on a small clearing surrounded by 50 miles of forest. There was a steel gate for keeping bears out, 2/3 of the way down the column staircase, and surrounding the base was a 10-foot-high chain-link fence. To the south, a downward sloping trail led to the other towers. Most days I'd hike the path as far as the nearby lake, but since that morning it'd be hidden behind the fog, I trekked through the forest instead. About 2 miles out, after vaulting over the rotted trunk of a lodgepole pine, my left foot sunk into a puddle of ooze. I was standing in blood. As I dragged my boot through the dirt, I noticed a series of red stains leading up to a pine tree and looked up. A dead thing sagged around a crooked branch. I could make out tattered flesh and blue-purple guts, badly twisted out of shape and fluttering in the breeze. I wasn't sure what kind of animal it was, or had been, even. In all my years, I'd never seen anything torn apart so viciously. Heck, could have a person have done it? Sometimes we got a few crazies drifting through. In the 80s, a weird cult even took up residence. 16 folks lived out of a filthy camper van parked down by the lake and worshipped an old native god, which they claimed inhabited the forest. As I stood there, open-jawed, blood dripped into my mouth, disgustingly warm against my tongue. The kill was fresh. That meant whatever stashed the corpse couldn't be far away. I spat, my saliva coming out mostly pink. Then I rushed back to the tower, kicking up puffs of dust, painfully aware of how loud my feet sounded. There was a gust of wet air, followed by this eerie stillness. Every bird for miles around stopped chirping all at once, or maybe I only imagined they had. And then there was a huge crash, wood splintering somewhere close. I ran fast, trampling through saplings and vines, and even as I sprinted along like a man being hunted, a tranquil voice in the back of my mind insisted there was nothing to worry about, that I just had an overactive imagination. But still, better get back to the tower as quickly as possible, just to be safe. I locked the fence and gate and rushed into the cabin, where I rinsed out my mouth and splashed cold water across my face. And then, staring at my reflection, I started to laugh. What sort of ranger gets spooked by a dead animal? In the safety of the watchtower, my pulse crawled back down. I kicked my feet up and spent the next few hours trying not to picture the carcass. The operator came back over the radio a little after 6. His transmission sounded faint and garbled, which wasn't unusual when conditions were so poor. Tower 1, report in. Over. No reply. I pictured Phil stumbling across tangled guts outside his tower. 20 seconds passed. Then my mental image shifted to Phil, suspended from a tree, intestines swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Come to think of it, those remains had looked somewhat. Tower 1, are you there? Over. The operator's voice had moved past irritation and onto concern. I considered mentioning the incident, but what would I have said? Sir, I stumbled across a dead animal and almost emptied my bladder. Get a team of rangers out here stat. Hitch would never let me live it down. Operator, this is Tower 2, Hitch said. Storm's getting worse. I can't even see cabin 1 through my binoculars. I doubt old Phil be getting much traction on his radio. Over. A tightness in my chest I hadn't even realized was there eased off. Phil was fine. We just hit a patch of nasty weather, that's all. I realized the operator was waiting on me and said, Tower 3, reporting in. Over. Hitch said, busy daydreaming about me again, Tower 3. Face facts, ain't never gonna happen. Over. Come in, Tower 4, the operator said, ignoring her. Do you copy? Over. He tried again, sounding considerably more anxious, and was met with silence. We were 2 rangers down. It took the operator a few minutes to decide what to do next. Okay, let's see if the storm clears up by morning. If not, we'll send you folks to check alls, okay, with Luke and Phil. Keep the channel open in the meantime. Over and out. He'd most likely send me to Tower 4 since I was closest. It would only take an hour by jeep, but between the mist and the corpse, I'd started to feel a tad anxious scared even. Putting the thought out of my head, I threw on some music, made dinner, had a few beers to take the edge off, and then turned in early. With any luck, the storm would ease up by morning. A little after midnight, I was woken by bumps and thuds outside. I lay absolutely still and listened carefully. The sound of heavy steps circled the tower. Even though I was safe up in the cabin, I slipped on my jacket and grabbed a rifle off the wall. Noises outside usually meant a bear had sniffed out food and came to investigate. A quick warning shot would send it running. I flicked on the cabin lights and strained my neck to look down. Beneath me, the world was masked by heavy fog. It felt like being adrift at sea. A few minutes passed. The sound circled me once, twice. All I could make out were a few isolated treetops. When it became clear whatever was down there wouldn't wander off by itself, I stepped out onto the walkway, and the second I did, the thing halted. A soft rain fell cold. There was a silhouette of a dark, out of shape just beyond the fence. Powerful floodlights surrounded the base of the tower, but in truth, I was scared to flick them on, electing to fire blindly instead. And all the time it would take to blink, the shape tore into the forest. Pine trees rocked back and forth. I heard a ruffle of feathers, birds taking flight, eager to get away from whatever was beneath them. I'd never seen a bear move so fast. Hell, I've never seen anything move that fast. I waited 15 minutes just to make sure it didn't return. Then I went inside and slept, or tried to, even. The next morning, clouds the size of Wyoming had piled up overhead. Both towers, 1 and 4, missed the checks again. Part of me wanted to mention my encounter, but I could already hear Hitch's sarcastic response. "Aw, the whittle shadows spook you. I got a nightlight you can borrow." Preempting my deployment to Tower 4, I said, "Maybe we should wait and see if the weather clears up by midday. Over." "How about you keep your trap shut and let me call the shots?" the operator replied. He was panicked. 2 rangers not reporting in, 1 for more than 24 hours. There'd be a few raised eyebrows back at the station, all right. By now, the entire skyline had been painted gray. All I could see through the window were raindrops the size of gumballs. It was a small miracle my radio still picked up a signal. "Okay, Hitch. Think you can make it to Tower 1 and scope things out? Over." "Sure can," she replied. Over. "Perfect. In Tower 3, what's it like on your end? Think you could manage to drive out to 4? Over." "I don't know if that's such a good idea," I said. "Visibility isn't great. Over." Hitch cut in with, "Operator, maybe I should swing by Tower 3 and drop off an emergency teddy bear." Over. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't enamored by Hitch's charm. "Tower 3, could you make the drive? Yes or no? Over." The operator enunciated each word carefully, like he was scolding a toddler. What was I supposed to say? An animal got close to my tower last night, so now I'm too busy hiding under my bed sheets. I sighed. "Yeah, I can make it. Over." "All right then, check the guys guys are okay, and then report back as soon as you can. Over and out. Hanging up the transceiver, I could almost taste the blood again. But, scared as I was, I had an obligation to check on Luke. He might have been lying half dead in a ditch, crying out for help. I slid my handgun into my holster, threw the rifle over my shoulder, and then descended the tower, hovering at the gate to study the clearing a few times. Then eventually, I hopped in the Jeep. There was a booming roar of thunder as I started the engine. Lightning illuminated the fog briefly, and for just a moment, the rearview mirror was filled with a pair of red eyes, glowing like flashlights. I whipped around just in time to glimpse a bestial shape slipping into the haze. My heart jackhammered against my chest as I fumbled for the rifle. In the 5 minutes I kept the barrel pointed at the tree line, there were no sounds or signs of movement. Were my eyes playing tricks? I sped along the patched and bumpy trail, bouncing around in the seat, the suffocating canopy closing around me. As the vehicle struggled over a ridge, thunder boomed again. Then the forest brightened up, revealing silhouettes darting between trees. Intruders. I slammed on the brakes so hard my chest got thrown into the steering wheel. The world dissolved back into gloom before I could grab my pistol. I cracked the window and listened carefully. Silence. Was it a herd of deer, maybe? The noise of the Jeep probably spooked them. 40 minutes later, after following the trail up into the rocky hilltops, I reached Tower 4, tucked against the mouth of a sprawling mountain range that was completely blotted out. Pulling up, the headlights revealed a downed fence. My stomach contracted. Still no need to panic any more than I already was. Fences collapsed all the time, especially after storms. I stepped out of the Jeep. The rain pounded down hard and heavy, numbing my face, and the cutting breeze from the north was like a breath along the back of my neck. With my rifle pointed across the slope, until the very last second, I retreated towards the tower staircase. There I leaned into every corner, taking stock of the next section before making a turn, not entirely sure what I expected to find. Another pile of remains, maybe. A third of the way up the stairs, the gate lay wide open. That was a bad sign. Terrible, even. Keep the gate locked at all times is the first lesson in Park Ranger 101. Somebody would have to be in a heck of a rush to leave it open. But then again, this was Luke I was dealing with. Maybe he took the gate about as seriously as the checks. I closed and locked it behind me to make sure nothing else could get into the tower. "Work it out," whispered a quiet voice in the back of my head. If something besides Luke was waiting for me up in the cabin, I'd be like a rat in a cage. I waved the thought aside, rounded another corner, and then heard a deep bellow echo through the mountains, gradually rising in volume. I gritted my teeth and kept climbing. From there, things only got worse. The cabin door was wide open, busted off its hinges. "Luke," I shouted, my voice so high I barely recognized it. I took a few steps forward, felt glass crunch beneath my boot, and then stopped and slowly glanced around. At the far side of the cabin, the window was busted, exploded inward, and most of the equipment was tipped over on its side. Clearly there'd been a struggle, but whatever caused the glass to break was long gone. I felt slightly relieved until I remembered I'd come to check on Luke. A ranger had been missing for 24 hours, and their tower was completely trashed. I had to call it in. At least now the station would send out a crew to do a search and rescue. The radio transceiver dangled over the edge of a table, sitting askew. When I reached down to grab it, my eyes almost bulged out of their sockets. The transceiver was there, along with something I didn't expect to see. It was a hand, just a hand, severed at the wrist and still clutching the transceiver, suspended over a patch of floor crusted with blood. In my mind's eye, I could see Luke discovering a corpse, one wrapped around a tree trunk and flapping like a pile of tattered rags, then sprinting back to the tower so terrified he forgot to close the gate. Or maybe something had chased him up the column staircase, and there was no time. And then, a half second before he could put out a call for help, two red orbs the size of fists lit up the wall of gray beyond the window. There it was again, another bellow, much clearer now, coming from directly beneath the cabin. It was followed by a series of bumps and thuds, the sound of hard feet resonating against the steps. Next thing, there was a metallic clang, which made the whole structure tremble. Whatever was down there had just rammed the gate. There was a second thud. I struggled to maintain balance as the light fixtures died. I plucked the hand off the transceiver, feeling a queasy mixture of disgust and terror, and failed to pick up a signal on any channel. There were no reinforcements coming to save the day. The creature charged one last time. Now blinded with sweat, my feet tangled together, and down I went. Would the steel bars hold out until the storm passed? Sure didn't seem like it. Trembling, I clambered up and pointed my rifle at the door. The only way I saw myself leaving Tower 4 was between a powerful set of jaws.